Okay, guys, so several of you said that you didn't have any questions, but I did have some questions from a couple of you. So what I'm going to do is the questions that were asked for, I'm going to go ahead and make this video showing you how to work them out, and then I'm going to post this and you can watch it. Now, this is as of 10:30 on Wednesday morning. Tomorrow is when I'm posting your test, and then that won't be due, but it will be due Friday, so I'll have the weekend to grade it. Friday at midnight. All right, so the first question was number 2, which was 5 over x minus 5 minus 1 over x plus 5 is equal to 10 over x squared minus 25. First thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you factor this, the x squared minus 25, into x minus 5 times x plus 5. Hopefully you all see that. Now, check for what answers that x can't be. X cannot equal 5, and x cannot equal negative 5. Hopefully you see why. Now, you need to find the least common denominator. Well, I've got x minus 5 times x plus 5 over here on the right-hand side. And on the left-hand side, I've got x minus 5 and I've got x plus 5. So my least common denominator is x minus 5 times x plus 5. So everything gets multiplied by this. Okay. If I multiply the first term, the x minus 5s will cancel out. So I'm going to have 5 times x plus 5. I'm going to have minus 1 times the x plus 5's cancel out this time, so I have x minus 5. And since I'm multiplying by this whole thing over here, it's just going to equal 10. So now I distribute, so I get 5x plus 25 minus 1x plus 5 is equal to 10. Here we got to get into your algebra skills. Combine your like terms first. 5x minus 1x is 4x. 25 plus 5 is 30. Okay, so then we're going to subtract our 30. So we're going to get 4x is equal to negative 20. Or we get x is equal to negative 5. But x cannot equal negative 5, so there is no solution to this problem. Okay. So that was the first one. The next one that y'all asked for was question number 6. So we've got the square root of negative 50 times the square root of negative 90. All right, first off, guys, take the I out. So this becomes I times the square root of 50 times I times the square root of 90. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and simplify the square root of 50. That is the square root of 25 times the square root of 2. So we know what the square root of 25 is, so we can simplify that. So it becomes 5i times the square root of 2. Now the square root of 90, well, that's the square root of 9 times the square root of 10. We know what the square root of 9 is, so that becomes 3i square root of 10. Now we have to multiply this together. Guys, what is 15 times, or I'm sorry, what is 5 times 3? Well, that is 15. What is I times I? That's I squared. Now, the square root of 2 times the square root of 10 is the square root of 20. So we got a little bit more work to do. 15 is still going to be 15. What is I squared, ladies and gentlemen? Well, if the square root of I is the square root of -1, then I squared is -1. So that's -1. Now, the square root of 20, well, that's the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. So we know the square root of 4 is 2, and we got the square root of 5. Guys, if I'm going too fast, rewind it, watch it again, okay? 15 times 2 is 30 times -1, so I get -30 square root of 5. Okay? And that's the answer for number 6. The next one that was asked for was number 8. So I have 5 over 2 minus 4i, and I want that in standard form. Just a reminder, guys, standard form means I need to get rid of the I in the denominator. How am I going to get rid of an I when I have a subtraction sign in between? I'm going to multiply by the conjugate. So I'm going to multiply by 2 plus 4i. And again, the whole reason I multiply by the conjugate is to deal with the middle terms. So let's go ahead and do the top. Multiply that 5 by everything, so I get 10 plus 20i. And now my bottom becomes 2, not 2. 2 times 2, which is 4, minus 16i squared. Okay, so we have our 10 plus 20i up top still. I'm going to leave that alone. Okay, and now I have 4. Now, this says minus 16 times I squared. Well, I squared is -1. So 16 times -16 is positive 16. So we're going to be plus 16. So I now have 10 plus 20i divided by 20. Now there is a number that each one of these three things, 10, 20i, and 20, something goes into all three of those numbers. 10 does. So we're going to divide everything by 10. You must do this. If you leave it as this, then you haven't completed it. You haven't simplified it. So it becomes 1 plus 2i over 2. Now, you can write, I'm fine with it this way. If you want to, you can write 1/2 plus I as well. But, either this way or this way would be fine. This is not fine. Not fine, because you haven't reduced it. Okay. So the next question was number 11. So it says solve by extracting the square. You have 5x squared minus 38 equals -52. Well, before you can extract the square, you got to get the x squared by itself. So we're going to add 38. And we're going to have 5x squared is equal to -14. Then we're going to divide by 5. And we're going to have x squared is equal to -14 over 5. Now, the next step is to take the square root. Hopefully at this point you realize that you're going to have imaginary answers, because nothing squared is going to be a negative if it's a real number. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. We're going to have x equals. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so tired of you all forgetting the plus and minus here. Whenever you take the square root, plus, minus, the square root of -14 over 5. So the only other thing that we have left is pulling out the I, because 14 and 5 can't be simplified. So we got x equals plus or minus I root 14 over 5. Please make sure you have that plus and minus. If you don't, then it's going to be marked wrong. Okay. Okay. Next was number 14. We have 3x cubed minus 4x squared is equal to 12x minus 16. And we are supposed to find all solutions and check for extraneous solutions when necessary. Well, guys, for something like this, put everything on the same side. Mat it, everything on the same side. 3x cubed minus 4x squared minus 12x plus 16 is equal to 0. Then group them. What's the greatest common factor between 3x cubed and 4x squared? Well, it's going to be x squared. So I've got x squared times 3x minus 4. And the greatest common factor between negative 12x and 16 is going to be negative 4. And that's going to end up being 3x minus 4. All right, so now we have our two pairs. We have x squared minus 4 times 3x minus 4. So what do? This gets factored, so it becomes x minus 2 times x plus 2 times 3x minus 4 equals 0. Now guys, how many solutions should we have between real and imaginary? We should have 3. How many are we going to have? We're going to have 3. This is going to be x equals 2. This is going to be x equals negative 2. And this is going to be x equals 4 over 3. Now, it would be smart of you to check these, but I can tell you right now that based on the way the problem is, there is nothing extraneous here. Okay. So that's it for 14. Now, I found it interesting that someone asked me for number 15 and there's no number 15 on here. So I'm just going to assume that you meant number 16. Okay. So let's take a look at number 16. X to the 4th minus 4x squared minus 5 is equal to 0. Guys, the thing that you have to see, you have an even power, and another even power actually. Whenever you're skipping powers like this, just factor it, pretend it's like a quadratic, okay? So what gives you x to the 4th? Well, that's pretty straightforward. It's x squared and x squared. What gives you 5? Well, it's got to be 5 and 1. I can't do anything else with that. Now I need to get negative 4 out of that, so I'm going to subtract 5 and add 1. That equals 0. Okay, so now what? Well, we get x squared minus 5 equals 0. We get x squared plus 1 equals 0. This one's going to have 2 imaginary roots and 2 real roots. And once again, they're not going to be extraneous. All right. So I'm going to get x squared is equal to 5. And I'm going to get x squared is equal to negative 1. Please do not try to factor this as a difference of squares. Why not? Because it's not a difference. That's a good reason, right? So x equals plus or minus the square root of 5. And then over here we get x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 1. Well, okay. The square root of 5 I can't do anything with. What's the square root of negative 1, guys? Please do not. I get frustrated when you all try to tell me that you don't know what the square root of 1 is. Okay? X is equal to plus or minus, well, square root of negative 1 is just plain old I. Okay? So we have our 4 solutions, plus or minus I, which are imaginary, and plus or minus the square root of 5. All right, 2 more that you were asked for. Number 19. You have the cube root of 5x minus 10 is equal to 4. Okay, well, how do you get rid of a cube root? You cube it. So if I cube this, if I bring this to the third power, it becomes 5x minus 10. And then I have to do the same thing to the right-hand side. So what's 4 to the third power? Well, 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 4 is 64. All right, so I'm going to add 10. I'm going to get 5x is equal to 74. And we get x is equal to 74 over 5. Now this one you do want to make sure that it works. So you have the cube root of 5 times 74 over 5 minus 10. It's got to equal 4. Well, what is the cube root of, well, the 5's will cancel out, so I get 74 minus 10. That's supposed to equal 4. Well, what is the cube root of 64? It is indeed 4, so 4 equals 4. Okay. All right, last one that y'all asked me for was number 20. So I've got 3x minus 2 over x squared minus 4x equals x over x minus 4 minus 1. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to factor this one. I'm going to factor this, so I'm going to have x times x minus 4. Now, before I go into least common denominators, what can x not equal? Well, x cannot equal 0. X cannot equal 4. If I get one of those two answers, that is an extraneous answer. All right. So now, where do I go from here? I have x times x minus 4, I have x minus 4, and I have 1. My least common denominator is going to be this x times x minus 4. So everything gets multiplied by x times x minus 4. If I multiply the first one, I end up with just 3x minus 2. Now this x minus 4s will cancel out, so I've got x times x. Please don't forget that part, guys. Okay? And then I have this 1 gets multiplied by everything, so it becomes minus the quantity x squared minus 4x. Okay, let's see what we can get rid of. Well, x squared minus x squared, I'm just going to rewrite this because some of you don't see this or you forget to do it. X squared minus x squared, and this becomes plus 4x. Okay, the x squareds are going to cancel out. So I'm going to have 3x minus 2 equals 4x. Well, I'm going to subtract 3x. And I've got negative 2 equals x. All right, let's make sure. Let's plug it back into the original problem. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. minus 2 divided by negative 2 squared is 4. So I've got 4 minus 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. So I have negative 8 over 12, or negative 2/3. Now, I've got, let's go ahead and erase a little bit so we can see what I'm doing here. I've got my negative 2 over negative 2 minus 4, and I have to subtract 1 from that. So I've got negative 2 over negative 6, or 1/3. So I've got 1/3 minus 1, which is equal to negative 2 over 3. Are these two equal? Yep. So we're good. Our answer is good. It's not extraneous. That's all you asked me for, guys. If you need more, don't wait so long. All right. Also, please, send me a message, or please post in the discussion section the problems that you wanted to see. It doesn't matter if who posts it. If it gets there, it's there. Now don't ask for these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 problems. Don't ask for those again. But if there's something else that you need to see, I'll be happy to show you. Thanks.